So if I had to describe what Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice is, I'd say it's like something you'd hear on the schoolyard. You know, something exaggerated by a child's wild imagination. You know, for sure a movie that insane couldn't exist in real life. I mean, it couldn't exist, it's too insane. But that moment when it does exist, that's Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice. So I gotta say, I've received many comments over the years asking me to review Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice. And this is actually a pretty hard movie to find. You know, you have to almost go on the black market to find it, or, you know, pay obscene amounts on eBay. And once you've seen it, you could kind of understand why. It's definitely the subject matter. You know, maybe Japan just wants to hide this movie. But I can eventually see, you know, something like Grindhouse eventually selling it, because that's sort of like their niche, you know, they like sort of exploitation type movies like this. But as of right now, you can watch this movie for free on Daily Motion, so I'll provide the link for you in the description. But yeah, pretty much my first reaction to this movie was just, what? You know, what is this? And because of that, I could say that it definitely lived up to the hype. And I also can't really say that I've seen anything else like this. You know, and that's not easy. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. So it's definitely saying something. But this film came out in the 70s. And during this time, they saw sort of a renaissance of exploitation films like Shaft. And actually, the actor Shintaro Katsu always wanted to make his own. And so, essentially, this is a Japanese version of Shaft. And it goes right down to the funky music. And you know, when you describe a story for a film like this, it's gonna get a little vulgar, so I'm just giving you a warning. And I do try to keep this channel family friendly, but you know, with this film, all bets are off. So the story follows Hanzo Itami, played perfectly by the actor Shintaro Katsu. And he plays sort of a cop or detective for the Shogun Magistrate's office in Edo. And he's kind of known for just questioning his higher-ups, you know, his superior officers. And he even gives nicknames to some of them. But overall, he's just a great detective in every way. He's super strong, he can take a lot of pain, he's great at fighting. But out of all of that, he's known the most for having a very powerful and gigantic...
Dick!
Yeah?
Take a look out of starboard.
Oh my god, it looks like a huge...
And basically he uses it to interrogate women, and pretty much to confess to anything. And I'll also add that this is all non-consensual, so at least at first. And Hanzo is after this escaped convict and known murderer. So basically, using every skill available to him, Hanzo must find this killer and bring him to justice. So the premise of this film is definitely just gonna alienate, I'll say, most audiences. If we want to be honest, basically this is a movie about a detective who interrogates women by raping them. And you know, because of that, you really have to question, is Hanzo a good guy or just as bad as the thieves and murderers he pursues? And you know, you really have to see these interrogation scenes to believe them. In one scene, we see Hanzo lying flat on the floor while a woman is tied up above him, and then she gets slowly lowered down onto his massive private part. And at first it appears that the woman's just screaming in agony, but then it's revealed that she's actually enjoying it, and she doesn't want him to stop. And he threatens to stop, and that's the interrogation. And it's really ridiculous to watch, but somehow they film this in, I'll say, the least graphic way possible. You know, that's an accomplishment in itself. But you can still enjoy this film if you just don't take any of it real serious. You know, don't take any of its torture, self-torture, sexual assault scenes serious, and you'll enjoy it. And this film actually is part of a trilogy. They all star Shintaro Katsu, but they're all just by different directors. You know, the director of this one did Lone Wolf and Cub. But I did hear that the plots in the other two films follow a similar formula to this one. Basically, just Hanzo hearing of a corrupt government plot. He encounters someone who knows of information. He then strengthens his penis powers with rice bales and self-torture. And then he proceeds to get a woman to tell him everything she knows, using that method. After that, he'll track down the criminal through classic detective skills, and then either takes them into custody or just kills them. And it is very formulaic, but also just very fun to watch. You know, because the cinematography actually is surprisingly well done. And, you know, just the sense that anything can happen in these insane films. And it's sort of a nice feeling to have when you watch a film. Because, you know, when you've seen so many, you start to predict everything that's gonna happen. But not in these films. And the acting by Shintaro Katsu playing Hanzo, I'll say it's pretty perfect. He definitely nails that character. His character does never really seem to display much emotion, you know, beyond just what works for him. And you also never really feel that his character is ever in danger. And it's because he's just such an absolute badass. He can murder anyone even with his bare hands. So he's just exciting to watch. But probably the best acting in this film comes from the actor who was also in Godzilla vs. Hedorah. And that's the actor who plays Onishi. And he sort of ends up being the comedy relief in this, and it's just due to his constant bickering with Hanzo. Also, the two assistants are definitely a comical highlight as well. You know, just bumbling and energetic. You know, you kind of can't help but laugh at just their antics when they feel insignificant compared to their boss, Hanzo. And this film is just filmed a lot like a exploitation flick, you know, the type you would get from the 70s. Has that sort of feeling where, again, anything can happen. And it's also got some pretty unique uses of lighting, you know, blood spurting like geysers, and just camera angles that are quite unusual. For example, the camera angles used during the infamous interrogation scene, they use a pretty smart way to hide Hanzo's penis. And the camera uses sort of a fisheye lens from his penis's point of view. And this all sounds weird, but somehow it works. And I really like the editing in this. It's very psychedelic and just reflective of the times. With the film just beginning and ending with Hanzo just standing on a map of actual Japan. I also really enjoy just the quick jump cuts that are used throughout the film. So overall, just the cinematography is definitely the movie's strongest point. And the score just sounds like something you would hear from Shaft. And somehow it fits the film just really well. You know, just using psychedelic horns and guitars. The score definitely feels like a 70s exploitation film. And again, it just works awesomely well here. And the song at the end is done by the 70s glam rocker group called The Mops, and it's pretty awesome. It has sort of a constant laughing vocal that's just very catchy and just fun to listen to. So the score definitely is another highlight. But if it wasn't for all this wacky, insane stuff, I don't think this film would really stand out or be remembered. And halfway through the film, I did begin to get a little bored. You know, the pacing wasn't the best. But this was at least until the next insane interrogation scene. And the fight scenes are pretty awesome and bloody. There's also some insane traps like spears just shooting out of walls. You know, just fun stuff that reminds me of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. So overall, this film definitely isn't for everyone. But you know, if you like 70s exploitation or weird stuff, then you'll definitely find things to enjoy. It's essentially a cop film set in Edo, Japan. The only thing really jidaigeki about the film is just the setting and fight scenes. Everything else just feels like it's from the 70s. So if you're up for this sort of thing, you know, definitely go see it. Right now, you can watch it on Dailymotion for free. So after this, I'm definitely going to have to watch the other 2 films in this trilogy. It's unfortunate that they're not all directed by Kenji Misumi like this one. But I did read one of the premises for one of these films, and it involves raping ghosts, so I'll definitely have to check that out. There's also a version of Hanzo the Razor starring Ken Watanabe. And I've heard good things about that film. It seems like it's more serious than this one, and some people actually say they like that one more. If you want to watch that one, it's on SamuraiDVD.com. Eventually I'll review it. So anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on this film or the other films in the series. You know, what's the best version? And if you like this video, you know, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, the notifications. And if you want to support the channel, I have a Patreon. It'll also be in the description. And like always, thanks for watching.